It's with great sadness I couldn't be at tonight's meeting. I'm in Maryland at FEMA training. I went through a lot of material about the national parks, but finally I found it, The National Parks and a Woman's Voice by Polly Welts Kaufman. Chapter 2, page 49, 4 short pages named DAR Memorials Become the Catalyst for National Parks, inspired me for tonight's presentation. 5 years after its founding, in 1890, the DAR won its first major preservation victory. Soon after the city of Philadelphia left the second floor offices at Independence Hall, the city awarded the Sons of the Revolution the use of the second floor. The DAR asked the city if they could hold meetings as well. Ellen Nixon Whalen Harrison was a descendant of men with a close association to the events that took place in 1776. Mrs. Harrison was the great-granddaughter of Robert Morris, Jr., a founding father of the United States. Morris was a Liverpool-born American merchant who financed the American Revolution and signed the Declaration of Independence, the Article of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. Mrs. Harris also was the great-great-granddaughter of John Nixon. On July 8, 1776, he made the first public proclamation of the Declaration of Independence from the steps of Independence Hall, then called the Pennsylvania State House. The same year, Nixon was promoted colonel and later served under George Washington at the Battle of Princeton. In 1776, he became a member of the Navy Board and 2 years later was with George Washington again at Valley Forge. Naturally, the restoration of Independence Hall was a special interest to Mrs. Harrison. As regent of the Philadelphia chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, she led the DAR's efforts to restore portions of Independence Hall. She was later appointed to the board to take charge and collect historic relics for the museum. Mrs. Harrison was married to Charles Curtis Harrison, provost of the University of Pennsylvania. The city of Philadelphia gave the chapter permission to undertake the restoration of the second floor of Independence Hall, including the banquet room and assembly room chambers, after raising $5,000, an enormous sum for the day. In extensive historic research, T. Mellon Rogers, a prominent architect, was hired by DAR to execute the work. The restoration was completed in February 1897 and presented to the city. The DAR not only proceeded to direct and pay for the restoration of the second floor, but convinced the city to restore the whole building in time for the 4th of July in 1898. The first proposal of Independence Hall Park originated in 1915, when architects Albert Kinsley and D. Knickerbocker Boyd proposed clearing the half block in front of Independence Hall. Kingsley and Boyd were motivated by a desire to create a fitting setting for Independence Hall, lessen the fire hazard, reduce congestion, and beautify the entire district. The commencement of World War II led to the heightened sense of patriotism and urgency towards the protection of national monuments. On June 28, 1948, Congress passed Public Law 795 H.R. 5053 to authorize the creation of Independence National Historic Park, and it was formally established on July 4, 1956. When the National DAR held its annual convention in Philadelphia the next spring in 1899, no doubt to admire Independence Hall, they included a pilgrimage to Valley Forge, site of Washington's encampment in the winter of 1777 and 78, where more than 2,000 soldiers died of disease. This short video, called Surviving Valley Forge from History.com, the A&E television networks, describes the conditions the soldiers had to endure. The DAR women were led through Valley Forge by Major Isaac Heston Todd, a farmer of the valley and a Civil War veteran. He showed the ladies a field of unmarked graves on his land identified by a single gravestone. The headstone was nothing elaborate, but it was the only marked grave at Valley Forge and bore the initials J.W. and the date 1778. Major Todd gifted the grave, some adjoining land, and an access road in return for DAR's pledge to erect a memorial and care for it. DAR established a fund and began receiving donations. 2 years later, after the national campaign, the DAR dedicated a memorial shaft modeled after Washington Monument called Waterman's Monument. Before his death in office, President McKinley had supported the daughters in their patriotic efforts at Valley Forge. The monument was dedicated to all those who died at Valley Forge and placed at the burial grounds at Valley Forge. The monument was placed near the only marked headstone of Lieutenant James Waterman from Rhode Island, who died on April 23, 1778. Valley Forge was designated a U.S. Natural Historic Landmark in 1961 and was listed in the initial National Register of Historic Places in 1966. In 1976, Pennsylvania gave the park as a gift to the nation for the bicentennial. The U.S. Congress passed a law signed by President Gerald Ford on July 4, 1976, authorizing the addition of Valley Forge National Historic Park as the 283rd unit of the National Park System. Our final national park tonight is Kings Mountain Military Park, located in South Carolina. The Battle of Kings Mountain was the bloody result of one of the most dramatic episodes of the American Revolution. The fight at Kings Mountain was a turning point of the Revolutionary War. The British had overrun much of South Carolina and were preparing to advance north to Virginia, subjugating the South as they moved. The battle so disrupted these plans that Thomas Jefferson called it the turn of the tide of success. More than strong enough to sweep away any of the disorganized American militia units that opposed them, Ferguson and his well-trained men advanced to Gilberttown in North Carolina, where they recruited, looted, and generally created havoc. It was there that the highly regarded British major made a fatal mistake. As part of his effort to end the revolution in the Carolinas, British General Lord Cornwallis ordered Major Patrick Ferguson to advance into the Carolina backcountry and pacify the region through the force of arms. Ferguson was the commander of a battalion of 1,000 loyalists, called Tories by the Patriots. Across the Blue Ridge in Tennessee were the individuals that Ferguson called the backwatermen. Rugged frontiermen, they wished primarily to be left alone, although they were willing and had fought on the side of the Patriots in several engagements. They are remembered today as the famed Over-Mountain Men. When the Over-Mountain Men refused to take the loyal oath to King George III as ordered by Ferguson, he sent a message across the mountains to them. In it, he warned them to comply with his instructions or he would march across the mountains to, quote, hang their leaders and lay their country waste with fire and sword. The threat did not go over well with the men of Tennessee. On September 26, 1780, they gathered under their leaders Colonels William Campbell and Isaac Shelby, Charles McDowell, and John Silver. The next morning, even though icy winds and snow had settled on the mountains, they began a long, hard march to find Ferguson and return his threat with fire. Riding on horseback through a heavy, cold rain, the Patriots reached Kings Mountain on the afternoon of October 7, 1780. Tying their horses to trees, they divided into two columns and encircled the mountain. Then, at 3 p.m., they began to fight their way up the steep slopes. For a time, the British held back with bayonet charges down the slopes, but the guerrilla fighting style of the American volunteers and militiamen rapidly began to take its toll. Fighting from behind trees and rocks, they shot down the enemy, forcing Ferguson to concentrate his men on smaller and smaller sections of the crest ridge of the mountain. Ferguson was on horseback, blowing a shrilled whistle to signal his men when he was shot from the saddle by a volley of Patriot bullets. He was propped up to a tree where he soon died. Including Ferguson, 225 men of the British force died at Kings Mountain that afternoon. Another 163 were wounded, and 716 were taken prisoner. The American forces suffered just 28 killed and 60 wounded. As Thomas Jefferson noted, the Battle of Kings Mountain began the turning of the tide of the American Revolution. British leaders recognized this as well, calling it the first link in a chain of evils. The fiercely independent Over-Mountain men had delivered a fiery blow for the cause of American liberty. The DAR contributed to several of the monuments located at Kings Mountain Military Park. The first being called Kings Mountain U.S. Monument. Constructed of white granite from the Mount Airy Quarry in North Carolina, the U.S. Monument towers 83 feet high above Battleground Ridge and rests on two separate marble bases. On each side of the monument are bronze tablets that dedicate the monument to the Patriot victory at Kings Mountain, discuss the significance of the battle, list the American and British commanders, and list the Americans killed in battle. On Thursday, October 7th, 1909, thousands congregated around the grandstand and monument with bands playing celebratory music. The Kings Mountain chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution held charge of the event, and the United Daughters of the Confederacy assisted in distributing pamphlets and cards. Kings Mountain Chronicle Feld Monument. This uncut, thumb-shaped, 3.5-foot high granite boulder is from Belmont, North Carolina, the hometown of Major William Chronicle. A brass plaque is affixed to the northeast side of the boulder. Its inscription says, "Here fell Major William Chronicle, October 7th, 1780. Erected by the Major William Chronicle Chapter, DAR, Galveston, North Carolina, 1930. During the battle, Major Chronicle was a little in advance of his men. He raised his military hat, crying out, 'Face to the hill!' He was struck in the breast and fell mortally wounded. Major Chronicle was only 25 years old when he was killed. This monument was dedicated on June 18, 1930, by the Major William Chronicle chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution from Galveston, North Carolina. Nearby South Carolina DAR chapters of Kings Mountain, York, and Lincolnton were also invited. Soon after that dedication, on the 150th anniversary of the battle, President Hoover stated, "This is a place of expired memories." In his speech, he chronicled the basic history of America, detailing many great things about the America, such as the rise of the American men and women. A year after Hoover gave his speech, a monument was erected by the DAR Kings Mountain chapter, which simply states, "On this site, President Hoover addressed the audience of 75,000 at the celebration of the sesquicentennial of the Battle of Kings Mountain," finishing with the date of the address. The Daughters are still contributing to this park. On October 7th, 2016, the 236th anniversary of the battle, the Frederick Hamblebright chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution dedicated an impressive marker honoring the African American patriots at the Battle of Kings Mountain. The marker was dedicated to 3 African Americans who fought during the battle: John Brody, Enos Bowman, and Andrew Ferguson. One was a freeman, one earned his freedom fighting on behalf of his owner, and one was a servant to William Campbell. That man was later freed for his service. A descendant of John Brody, Arthur Brody, was present at the dedication. This is the first marker placed on Kings Mountain National Military Park in almost 70 years. Kings Mountain National Military Park was listed as a National Register of Historic Places in 1996. This is the end of the presentation. I hope you liked it. I miss you all and hope to see you soon. Thank you.